Hi everybody, I'm Dan Fox. I'm the Commercial Director here at NCASS. The purpose of this webinar today is to talk about finance. It's a really important topic for us right now, isn't it? Because let's be honest, this is very much an economic crisis as much as it is a health crisis. Joining with me today, I've got Andrew James from the Catering Accounting Company. Hi Andrew.
Hello Dan, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And I've also got Roxy from NCASS. Hi Roxy.
Hi everyone.
So what we're going to cover today is we're going to think about all the different types of finance that the government has made available for us as small independent businesses. We're going to cover those in quite a top level detail, in all honesty, but we're going to focus on the three big hitters, them being the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, the Self-Employed Income Protection Scheme, and the grants that are being available to hospitality businesses. So it's your opportunity also to ask any kind of questions that you want. So if you've got any questions, chuck them down into the comments and section, either on Facebook or on YouTube. We're going to be going through as many of those questions as we possibly can. The idea is that this is a Q&A session, and we'll try and make it as relevant, as applicable to you guys as possible. So please throw your questions down. We'll cover as many as we can today. If we run out of time, and I'm going to be quite strict over time, so we're going to be finished by 3:45, so we've got 45 minutes to go through this. If we don't get through all your questions, don't worry, we can do another one of these on Thursday at 3 o'clock, so we can go through it then. Andrew, so do you want to first of all start by introducing yourself? What's your background, where you're from, and why you're here today?
Yeah, cool stuff. Thanks very much. Well, my name's Andrew James. I've been a director of the Catering Accounting Company. We may deal with some of the members indeed who are watching this webinar. And as you can see from the colour of my hair, I've been in this accountancy game a long time, trust me. And one of the things I found over that period of time is that businesses who are proactive, businesses that take decisions, businesses that look at their numbers and plan ahead are the ones that succeed. Those who shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, times are tough, and boy, they are tough at the moment, and just sit on their hands and do nothing, will probably fail. So you need to be proactive, you need to be out there, and hopefully you can take something away from today's session that will enable you to get your hands on cash, because cash is really important to get you through this situation.
You're absolutely right, Andrew. Really, it's so important for businesses to be proactive during this period, isn't it? Because we don't know how long this is going to last for. The latest news is that the restaurants and hospitality businesses could be the last businesses that are going to be able to open. So taking control of finance right now is absolutely critical. Would you say?
Absolutely. You've got to make sure that you've got enough cash to get you through this situation, however long it lasts. And the government have put out there a number of support measures, which on the face of it are quite generous. But the most important thing, generous though they may be, or perceived to be generous, is actually accessing that cash that's the key. So we hope to cover that off today, to look at those schemes in some detail and see how you can get your hands on that money.
Okay, well, let's jump into it then. So I've categorized the 5 different things that the government has done into 5 different levels, really, 5 different things. So I've said the things to help support salaries, either your own or those of your employees. There's grants, there's loans, there's rates relief, and then there's deferral of tax payments. Would you say that's about right, Andrew?
About right, yeah.
Yeah.
Equally, all of them have an importance for many businesses, but obviously the 3 big hitters, in my opinion, are the grants that the government have made available, the job retention scheme or the furlough scheme, which most people have heard about, and the support for the self-employed. Those are the 3 big hitters for members of NCASS.
So if we jump straight into the job retention scheme then, because this has been in the news very much this week, hasn't it? It's gone live yesterday. That's right, isn't it, Andrew?
Yeah, went live yesterday. Yeah.
So give us a brief overview, Andrew, on the coronavirus job retention scheme.
Okay, well, the idea of this scheme was the government were absolutely fearful of so many people being made redundant. So they were trying to put together some kind of arrangement or package that might indeed save people's jobs. Because if you're running out of cash and you've got no work, what are you going to do? You're going to probably lay off your staff. So to try and hedge against this, the government brought in this job retention scheme. And basically, in a nutshell, You look at somebody's salary, what you paid them in the last financial year, and you can recover 80% of that salary up to a monthly maximum of £2,500. Now, before I go on, Dan, I don't want to spend too much time on the job retention scheme right now, because you could do a whole webinar on the ins and outs of that scheme, and you'd last half an hour without a problem. But that in its nutshell is the broad outline of it. The scheme went live, as you say, yesterday. The government's portal was put in place yesterday, so people can now start making claims, and those claims can be backdated to the 1st of March 2020.
Yeah, so the key thing then is, what's the difference between the job retention scheme, Andrew, and the self-employed income protection scheme? Which one's right for you, for me as a business, if I'm a small business owner?
A very good question. You can only access the self-employed scheme if indeed you are self-employed. That means you're submitting a tax return. It means that you're either a sole trader, a partner, or a partner in an LLP. So those are the only people that will qualify for that scheme. The job retention scheme, on the other hand, is a scheme that's been set up to save jobs, to stop people being made redundant. So that can apply to the whole of your team that's working for you. So if you run a restaurant, if you run a fish and chip shop, and you've got a team of people who you employ and you're forced to close, you can save those people's jobs by accessing this scheme. So there's a distinction there between, on the one hand, somebody who's self-employed and somebody who's employed, and the job retention scheme is for the employed person.
Yeah, the easy way I like to think about that is, if you're an LTD, then you're an employee, aren't you? If you're putting that through payroll. If you are a partnership or a sole trader, then you are considered self-employed. That's right.
And you're doing a tax return. More than likely, you'd have to be doing a tax return. But bear in mind that some self-employed people still have a payroll. They still employ people. So if you're employing people and every month you're filing a PAYE return to the Inland Revenue, there's potential for you to furlough people.
Yeah. So a lot of people ask the question, right, I'm an LTD, I've got payroll, but actually it's only me and my wife that are on the payroll. Am I allowed to furlough my wife and myself? Can I do that?
Yes.
Yep.
But you probably want me to go on. So as a director,
I've got a question about that as well, actually. Directors often don't pay themselves. They pay themselves a nominal amount of money. So how would you advise them to be able to keep going, really, if you're only paying yourself just under £1,000 a month, and you're a director of a company? What would be your advice with that? And I think we'll probably come on to the minefield, which is the admin and red tape later on. But I think that it's not easy to get what you need, what the information you need. But, you know, lots of people do run companies and are directors, but the money that they take home that they pay themselves isn't enough money to sustain themselves now. So, and then they get 80% of that if they're furloughed. So that's even a bigger problem. What would your advice be on that?
Roxy, you just asked the most tough question that I could imagine, because basically those people are in a very, very difficult position. There's bare no bones about it, because the way the furlough scheme is geared is it is based on somebody's salary. So if you're on a salary, let's say £1,000 a month, £12,000 a year, right, as a director, you're only going to get 80% of that £12,000 per month divided by 12. So you're going to get £800 a month, aren't you?
And then you still have to pay tax on that. Do you, Andrew?
Yes, that £800 has to go on the payroll. So you're in a very, very difficult situation. The only answer that I can give people that are faced with those circumstances is you can have a look at universal credit, because your pay is at such a low level that you probably qualify for that. And the government have uplifted that by £20 a week. So to make that a little bit more attractive, well, not attractive, it's probably the wrong word, but might help people a little bit more. Or you've got to look at, Roxy, the business interruption loan to try and get you through this period until you can get back onto normal trading circumstances.
So just
and on that, we've just had a question through, or a comment through, that said that someone's just said that they're not eligible for a grant at all, and they've just got a rejection letter for a loan today. Andrew and Dan, in your experience, how difficult or easy is it to actually access these loans? I know, Andrew, you've got a dedicated service in-house for loans, but I think that lots of people are having similar problems, and it's not just about just submitting that loan application once, but about chasing your bank, about being persistent. What would your advice be?
Well, my advice for the loan scheme is first of all to go to your own bank, because they've got all your history, they've got your trading details. Most importantly, actually, they've got your money laundering documentation, which is basically one of the stalling blocks with people going for the loan scheme. Try your own bank. Now, I don't know from that gentleman why he's been rejected. Maybe he's not made adequate profits for the bank to lend. The banks have been told by the government to try and support as many businesses as possible. So what I would suggest to that person is maybe ring NCASS, and maybe they will put them through to Mark in my office, and he can have a look at that claim for them. Can't promise anything, but we'd need to really know the details of that claim to be able to comment fully on it. But don't give in. Let's have another go. As I said at the start, be proactive. Let's go for another bank. Let's try something else. Because if the more you try, you will succeed in the end, trust me. But yeah, ring NCASS, get in touch and see what we can do for him.
And what happens if you're self-employed? Can you still go for a business interruption loan?
Yes, you can. There's nothing to stop you going for a business interruption loan. But the self-employed scheme is similar in a way to the furlough scheme. Basically, you can get a grant of 80% of your profits averaged out over the last 3 years. So if you've traded successfully over the last 3 years, that grant amount can be quite decent, 80% of what you've earned. But if you're a new startup, or well, if you're a new startup, you probably can't access it anyway because you have to have traded in 18-19 tax year. But if your results have been poor, then again, your 80% is going to be 80% of a very small figure and might be therefore challenging for you.
So if we come back and think about the job retention scheme, because I think there's a few more questions we've probably got to think about that already. So you just clarified you can furlough yourself. Is that right, Andrew? You can definitely do it.
Roxy diverted us, Dan. We're going to answer that one. If you're a director, say husband and wife business, that's quite common in what we see, and maybe you're both directors, then initially it was thought directors couldn't furlough themselves, but the government changed the tune on that one, and so now you can, so long as, and here's the key, you only carry out statutory duties of directors. And you're going to say to me, people who are watching this, what the hell is a statutory duty of a director? Well, it's basically just doing the admin of the company, running the payroll, collecting the bank statements, doing the bookkeeping, that kind of stuff. And what it isn't is driving the company forward or doing business, trading, sales and stuff like that. So long as you're only doing the admin duties, you can furlough yourself.
You mentioned earlier on as well that you said that you might be worth looking at the universal credit as well. So are you saying it is possible to be furloughed and to be on universal credit at the same time?
I'm going to own up. I'm not an expert on universal credit by any means, but universal credit, to achieve that, it depends on your income. So if your income has been diminished, I would have thought that would be something to look at.
Yeah, I mean, it seems if you've got employees, the coronavirus job retention scheme seems, I mean, it's a godsend, really, isn't it? Let's be honest, it's a brilliant scheme, and we're really grateful for it. The reality is that a lot of hospitality businesses might not be putting all their staff through it, or primarily because they're concerned about the cash flow, literally just don't have the cash right now to pay their staff, and so therefore making them redundant rather than putting them through the job retention scheme. What would you say, Andrew, and to any businesses that are doing that? Is that the recommended thing to do, or would we say, look, actually you should do furlough your staff, and then we can worry about actually paying them the cash later on?
Yeah, I mean, you can always strike a deal, hopefully, with your team, because if your team feel that they're loved, they're respected, and actually I've developed a worksheet to how to try and look after your staff in this difficult time.
Yeah.
And if you think that, you trust them, you want to keep them, they're the people you want to work with when we come out the other side of this.
Yeah.
The staff will be so grateful for you looking after them and furloughing them. Whereas if you could take the choice, well, I'll make them redundant and hope that I can pick them back up again on the other side. That might not be the case. They might have found other jobs. So if you can't pay them at the moment, speak to them, say, look, we haven't had the cash in yet from the government. We'll pay you what we can to maybe clear your mortgage or pay your rent. but please bear with us. And as soon as we get our cash from the government, we'll pay you out in full. And I would suggest an approach like that, to be honest.
So you process the payroll first, and even if you don't have the cash to actually be able to pay it straight away, so process payroll and then have that conversation to say, look,
have a conversation with your team. You would have to get something in writing, probably to comply with employment law, because we don't want anybody ending up in a tribunal situation. So perhaps speak to an employment lawyer, or at least engage with your employee, get them to agree to a deferral of money. They may well like that because, they won't like it, but they may well accept it because it's better than being made redundant. And they know you're trying to look after them.
And it's gone live now, isn't it, the scheme, in terms of the system? So in order to get onto that, they just go to the government website, .gov.uk, I think, and they can work out exactly how much they should be paying, because it's not straightforward, is it? They can go onto the website and do it. There's an online calculator, and then you can actually do submission through that, can't you? Yeah.
You can, yeah. And it went live yesterday. We anticipated, because Devney in my office deals with a lot of this, we anticipated there might be crashes because it was going to be inundated. She said to me this morning that actually it had worked okay, and you can expect to get your cash in about a week's time.
Great.
Is it true that if you don't put all your information into the about the scheme and your situation into the website by tomorrow, you won't get the money by the 30th?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have to do it by then. And how are you? If you're not using your accountant,
it's not you won't get the money. It's just speed.
It'll be later.
Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, imagine somebody with a payroll. Say you run a chain of restaurants. One of your members might have a chain of restaurants, and they might have 40, 50 employees who they want to furlough, and actually working out, as I know Dan says there's a calculator on there, but it's still, trust me, a ball ache to work out the exact amount you're going to furlough them for. You might not physically be able to do it that quickly, but you will get the money in due course.
Yep. We've actually created a Q&A on the job retention scheme. So I imagine you've got lots of other questions. We tried to make them as applicable as we can. So I know we're going to post the link to that Q&A. It's on our website, but we can post the link for that in the comments section. So feel free to go and have a look at that, or go onto our website. And if you've got any further questions, or if there's something that's not covered in that, please drop your questions into the comments, and we can come on to that either later on or the next session. So if we move on, Andrew,
I've just got a quick question. Sorry, Dan.
No,
it just came in at that moment when you were just talking, finishing your conversation about it. Someone's asked, how would a street food season business use a furlough scheme for payroll staff, and on what basis, as pay varies drastically month by month? What happens then? Okay,
it's the average pay that you would have paid them in the last tax year is what you do, because there are many different types of employee. For instance, there are apprentices, there are part-time workers, there are zero-hour contracts, there are people who do various different amounts of work in peak periods. So again, what you do is you work out the average that you paid them in the 1920 tax year, and then you compare it with the amount of money you paid them in that month last year. So let me try and explain that in a little bit more detail. We're in April. It was probably Easter last year in April. You might have done a few events in Easter, around the Easter period. So your Easter pay might have been quite high for some of your team members. So you work out and look back to last year's payroll and see what you paid them in April. You also work out the average monthly pay that you paid them over the whole of last year. You take the higher, and that's what that's the amount you use for the basis of the furlough calculation. I hope that's clear, but if it's not, send us, if people want to send in an example or some numbers, and if we can, we'll help them out and try and work it out for them.
Thank you.
So just think about the self-employed income support scheme then. So this is for if you're a sole trader or a partnership, then you're able to get up to 80% of your profits, up to £2,500 per month. Is that right, Andrew?
Absolutely spot on, Dan. Yeah, correct.
And they're averaged over the last 3 years, aren't they? So it's the average.
16, 17, 17, 18, and 18, 19. You take an average profit over those periods. One thing to bear in mind, though, Dan, is you have to check that your profits from your trade are more than 50% of your total income. So let me give you an example of somebody. So somebody does their street food selling at weekends. They've retired from their main job, but they now have a substantial pension.
Yeah.
So you've got to make sure that your income from your trade, your catering business, exceeds 50% of your total income that you declare to the revenue. And so long as it does, you're eligible to claim the 80%.
Dave Harris has asked a really good question, actually. He said, I've been self-employed for 3.5 years. The self-employed grant, it's based over 3 years, but in year 1, I made a loss and then a profit in year 2 and 3. Would it only be worked out on year 2 or 3, or does it include my loss that I made in year 1? Because that almost seems unfair, doesn't it? You're going to be disadvantaged.
Dave, you're not going to like my answer. It includes the loss. So what you do is you aggregate the losses to the profits over that 3-year period, work out what the average is over those periods, and that's the way you calculate the amount to claim your 80% on. Sorry about that, but that's the way it's written.
Yeah.
So we've just had another question in, Dan. So someone's just said, I'm self-employed. I've previously submitted my tax returns, and in each of the last 3 years, we've made a profit. We are a partnership. All of my business income is on a self-employed basis. I have no other employment. I receive pension income, which is greater than my share of profit. My accountant says I will only qualify for 1 year as I have this additional income, which is more than my self-employed income. Is that correct?
I don't quite, to be honest, Roxy, I don't quite understand the question. The way you work it out, and I'll answer it in the same as giving a sort of general answer to it. Your trading income must exceed 50% of your total income on the average of the last 3 years. And actually, I've done. I'm doing another webinar, but Dan, we might use this on Thursday if you want to do another webinar, because I've got an example of what that gentleman Ian Stones is citing there, and it shows that how you work it out when you've got other income like pension income and your self-employed income, and in 1 year your self-employed income dips significantly. So I've got an actual calculation that I can show, but obviously I can't show it on this webinar. Yep. So Ian, if you want to wait till Thursday and we do another webinar, I'm sure we can in detail answer your question. Alternatively, get in touch with NCASS and they will put you through and we'll do what we can for you.
The big issue here for a lot of people is that this is all going to get paid in one tranche, isn't it, Andrew, in June? So it's a situation whereby that's a long time to wait for members, particularly when right now a lot of them would be trading at begin to get traded, particularly over Easter, but also then as the season now will have started for trading at festivals or doing good trades at their restaurant or cafe or pub. But right now they're not going to be able to get this till June. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty well. The government have said that the self-employed support will not be paid out till June. Which is why with some of the caterers that we deal with, I've suggested that they do try for the loan, because in theory, the loan turnaround time is 21 days. So you imagine where we are at the moment. Let's look at the calendar, 21st of April. So in theory, in 21 days, so the middle of May, you might be able to get your hands on your loan finance. Whereas without a shadow of a doubt, you're going to be waiting till mid-June to get your self-employed support from the government.
Yeah.
So there might be a month's time. You know, you might be a month quicker getting your loan than you will get your government support.
By the loan, you're talking about the coronavirus business interruption loan, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. What about for somebody? I'm just wondering. I've got a question about what about if somebody, they're really desperate for this money now. They need cash now. Literally, they need to be able to pay their mortgage or whatever it is. What do they do, Andrew? What can they do right now who are desperate and can't wait to June for this money, but maybe aren't applicable or can't wait 21 days for the coronavirus business interruption loan?
Well, you've led me to answer the question in a certain way there, Dan. If people have got mortgages, then they can get in touch with their lender and they should give them a 3-month holiday period from their mortgage. Equally, many people in this day and age probably rent. And my understanding is that landlords are not permitted to serve eviction notices on anybody who cannot pay their rent, certainly for the next 3 months.
Yeah.
So that gives you a bit of breathing space. And it gives you an opportunity then to maybe look at some of the alternative reliefs we talked about this afternoon.
Would you say then, both Dan and Andrew, even if you feel, because people don't want to not pay their bills, you pay your bills every month. People pride themselves on the fact that they pay all of their bills, even if everything in you just doesn't want to have to be in that position, and to even try, they might be scared that it'll affect their credit score, for example, as well. Would you say that, be persistent and just get in touch with everybody that you pay bills to every single month, and they might be surprised at the results? Or
indeed, talk to people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I said at the start, if you're not proactive, if you sit there, do nothing, you won't get a change. Nothing different. If you think something different's going to happen, you're close to insane. So you've got to do something. So pick up the phone, speak to your credit cards, speak to your bank, speak to your loan people, say, look, we're having trouble at the moment. Can we have a holiday period or whatever? And as you say, Roxy, you may find that they will help you out.
Yep, and there are a lot of the credit card companies have now started actually giving payment holidays on this, or extending the time that they've got to pay. And I think everybody realizes, don't they, that this is not normal circumstances, and unless we all chip in, and finance is a big thing, unless the finance companies help out, then they're going to lose all their money anyway. So they've got to do something, and they've got to do something to actually be able to help these businesses to survive. So that's the number one thing: is speak to people, speak to your mortgage, speak to your landlords, speak to anybody that you owe money to, and ask them the question, what can you do?
I'd speak to your accountant. You know, they might be able to help you. There's one thing I would like to mention, Dan, if I may. Among the other types of relief that the government have thrown out there at the moment, they've allowed certain deferments of tax liabilities, which we haven't really touched on yet. So if you're VAT registered and you've got a VAT bill that's due in the period from the 20th of March through to the 30th of June, you can defer that VAT bill. In other words, not pay it until March next year, March 21. Okay. If you pay your VAT by DD and you wish to defer, please cancel your DD, because the cynic in me suggests that HMRC will grab the money if you don't stop your DD. Yep. The other relief on the tax angle is that if you're self-employed, and I guess many of the members here listening are self-employed, you may well have a second tax payment on account to make on the 31st of July. Well, again, the government have allowed you to defer that tax payment to January 21. Fantastic. We get ourselves a bit of break. We keep some cash in the business. I want you all to be mindful, though, of the fact that if you do two of those things that I just mentioned, you're going to get a big tax bill in January 21, and followed by 2 months later, potentially a big VAT bill. So you need to be mindful of that and not just bury your head in the sand and forget about it, because you've got big liabilities that you're going to have to meet sooner or later. Just want to bring that up, Dan.
And the government themselves have recognised this, haven't they? And they said, look, if you are struggling to pay your VAT bills and your self-employed assessment bills, to actually call them up and speak to them. Now the issue is getting through, isn't it? You need to be patient with your time and set aside a lot of time, because obviously it's under great pressure at the moment.
What we do with accountants, Dan, is if we're calling that number and we can't get through, we always put something in writing immediately to the revenue, because at least then they don't deal with post any quicker than they deal with telephone calls. But I think we have to be mindful, even with the revenue, they're under a lot of stress and strain at the moment. But at least if you put something in writing to them saying, this is my position, I am deferring, or whatever, they can never turn around and say, well, you never spoke to us, or you never informed us of what you were doing. And with the deferment, they're allowing deferment with no interest and no penalties. So that's something to be borne in mind by all the taxpayers out there.
I think we're going to move on from the self-employment scheme in a moment. There is another Q&A on this as well on the website, which we'll post this out onto the comments as well. So the Q&A for the self-employed income protection scheme. Final one, though, before we move on, is how will I receive it? I know we've said we're going to get it in June. How will they actually receive this payment, Andrew?
Directly into your bank account. So that's one of the requirements of the scheme, is that you must have a bank account. Now, nowadays most businesses do have bank accounts, but part of the application process. What's going to happen, just to backtrack a little bit, with the self-employed scheme, the revenue are going to write to you and say that they think you might be eligible. right? So they're going to look back at your past year's tax returns and they're going to say, yeah, looking at your profits, you're eligible. Okay, but then you have to go onto the government's portal and make your claim. Part of making that claim will be to put your bank details in, your VAT numbers if you're VAT registered, etc., so that then they can pay it out to you. And they will write to you telling when and how much they're going to pay you.
So this is a really important key point. You're saying it's not something that comes automatically. You will actually have to apply for it.
They will write to you and tell you might be eligible, but you will have to apply. But
in that case, though, if you moved address, and you need to make sure your address is up to date with HMRC. Yeah. So it's really important they can do that now. Presumably they can log in to HMRC and do that on the website.
An accountant, he'll have what they call is a 64-8 in place for you, which is authority to deal with the revenue. He'll be able to make the claim on your behalf.
Yeah. But get that in place now so that you are notified.
All your details are up to date.
Yeah, great. Okay, so moving on then. So we're going to think about the grants. Okay, so this is a big thing, hugely expensive scheme that the government's put together to give every. Well, do you want to tell us about the grant scheme that's been announced, Andrew?
Yeah. Firstly, just to close off on those last two things, the furlough scheme and the self-employed scheme. Please remember, members, that all of those schemes, the income, the grant that you receive, however big or small it is taxable. So it has to go in your accounts or on your tax return next year when you receive it. Don't think it's absolutely free money with no tax on it. So you have to add it as part of your taxable income. Right, onto the grants. There's two types of grants. There's a big one and there's a small one. So the small one is for any business really who trades from a property where they pay business rates, and the rateable value of that property is up to £15,000, and you qualify for small business rates relief, you can get a grant of £10,000. And this is where we've been very successful so far at the Catering Accounting Company. As I mentioned, we managed to get for one of our clients £135,000 in grant money. Yep. Now, if you move on to the second scheme, which maybe will be relevant to many of the NCASS members, because it's specifically for the leisure, hospitality and retail sector. So the rateable value for the first scheme is up to £15,000, as I just mentioned. For the retail, hospitality and leisure sector, the rateable value of your property, if it's between £15,000 and £51,000, then you can apply and should receive a grant of £25,000. So that is a substantial amount of money to help you through this period of crisis that we're in.
And I'm right in saying that that is one per eligible property. So if you have several properties, you get one for each one.
They call it something like herindictment or something like that. It's the technical word they use. But yeah, so in other words, the claim that I just alluded to that we managed to get for a client of ours, they are retailers and they've got shops around the country. So each one of those shops, their individual outlets, they managed to get a grant for.
Yep. Yep.
Can I just ask a quick question? So most of our members don't have property.
Yeah.
So this is a huge problem at the moment. Also, we're coming across a lot of members who are having issues with councils, the semantics really of what the place is that they rent, whether it's a warehouse or, you know, the semantics are getting in the way, and they're finding getting huge difficulties really with getting their point across that actually I have this premises and I rent it, and therefore it should be included. And I really feel for these people, and I'd like us to be able to help them in some way. So I don't know whether it's about being persistent with your local authority and pleading your case to them.
Well, let's just, sorry, Roxy, cut across you a bit there, but I didn't mean to. Let's just take it step by step. To get a grant, you have to have a rates bill, okay, from your local council. The rates bill will have a reference number, your reference number on it. If you don't pay rates and don't have a rates bill, you will not get the grants, whether you're in retail or just another small business. So you have to have a rates bill. Then the government have listed a load of categories which fall within this leisure, hospitality sector, right? So if people are on the borderline of a particular sector, if they send in exactly what they do, we can have a look down this list to see whether they're even close to being able to claim. But I mean, I know some members have got situations where they they've got a mobile outlet, but they manufacture the food in like a warehouse or almost like a factory environment. I think they're going to be struggling to get the grant, to be brutal.
They'll can get it under the small business grant if the rates are under 15,000. So if they've got so if the business rates are under 15,000, they'll be qualified for the small business grant of 10,000, wouldn't they? So that's correct, isn't it, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
The one exception to this, Wales have got a different type of grant as well, which is available for any micro business. So it's not based on the rateable value of the property. It's if your business has been interrupted significantly by coronavirus, then you can also get a £10,000 grant as long as you pay. You're VAT registered with a turnover over £85,000. So just to summarise that, it's something called the Economic Resilience Fund, which is for Welsh-based businesses. They can get a grant up to £10,000 if they're VAT registered with a turnover over 85,000. And we've got a link on that. So if you wanted more information and you're in Wales, I mean, that's a really a good scheme that's going to help a lot of members. The reality is that I'm right in saying, aren't I, Andrew, that a lot of members don't live in Wales, they don't have a property, and they fall outside of scope for a lot of these grants, and it's absolutely galling, really.
So worrying. They must be so worried at the situation.
Yeah.
They can only go back on the support for the self-employed, really.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, it's the reason why we've been doing a lot of work, lobbying government and working with government to try to get a lot more for mobile caterers, and it's the same for the whole events industry, really, and they've really suffered from this. So it is something that we're working on in the background. We're still we're really hopeful that the government will announce some additional measures for the self-employed. So this is a really big part of what we've been working on in the background all this time. So bear with us on that.
Yeah, one other point that I just want to reiterate, just so that members aren't confused. With that self-employed support scheme that's out there, you do have to demonstrate that your business has been adversely affected by the virus.
Yeah. So the other big pain point that's been coming from this, though, is people have been expecting it quicker. So they're eligible, they know they're eligible, and it's taken a long time to get through, isn't it? So I read a report, was it yesterday, that said only 10% of these payments have come through because they're being administered by the local authority. Is that right? Yeah.
I mean, as I say, we've made these claims with the grant claims for retailers, and basically the retailers have got properties all over the country. So what we're finding is that various different councils, some of them are much quicker than others, and believe it or not, if you're based in the Midlands, Birmingham's pretty slow at the moment. So but we've managed to lodge claims in Yorkshire, Cornwall, Devon. So these more rurally type counties seem to have been able to process them a bit quicker. So if you're in those areas, you might have a bit more joy. If you're in big city situations, you might have to wait longer.
Is it worth chasing, Andrew? I know that in Birmingham, it's 21 days from when you submitted your application for a grant.
Yeah.
And they don't want you to get in touch with them until, well, a month afterwards, really, ideally. But
all I want to is that we've submitted a number to Birmingham City Council on behalf of clients, and as yet not one has crossed the line.
So do you actually need to apply for this? Because I was under the impression that it should just come through automatically.
No, you do
have to apply for them. Yeah, you do definitely have to apply.
Fill in a form.
But that's through your local authority, though, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a little form, a little checklist, because it's not just filling in your name and details. They want your VAT number and all sorts of information. So if members haven't claimed, again, be proactive, claim now, because the quicker you get it in, the quicker you get the money.
I want to move on because we've only got 6 minutes left. I do want to get finished by 3:45. It's important that people are able to get off. But if you've got any questions, please carry on putting them through. Like I said, we've got lots of information on the NCASS website, and if it's not on there, we can do another webinar on this next week. So please carry on firing your questions through in the comments, and we'll look to get those answered. So the next three things I want to just cover off in the last few minutes. We've thought a bit about loans, but I want to just go back and think a bit more about that. We've also got reliefs, and I know we talked briefly about deferral of tax payments. So if we I suppose we can knock off a couple of these really relatively quickly. So deferral of tax payments, we've already said you can go to the government to defer your VAT, your self-assessment, and your corporation tax bill, Andrew. And anything else?
Yeah, no, that's basically it.
Just
yeah,
call them up. Okay.
Principal taxes. Yeah.
Another big thing, if you've got premises, is rates relief. Tell us about the rates relief you can get, Andrew.
Okay, if you're in your retail, hospitality and leisure sector, you can get a rates holiday period for 12 months, starting in April. Yeah. And that is going to be a huge benefit if you're in the restaurant game, or if you're in the, say, fish and chip shop, takeaway food market. I'm sure that's going to be a welcome relief for you.
Do I need to do anything for that?
Yeah, good question, Dan. I'll be brutally honest, I don't know. I would imagine you would need to ring up or write to the local authority and point out that you will not be paying your rates because you qualify for the relief under the coronavirus provisions.
Other big one is rent relief. So obviously a lot of people have private landlords. I urge you go and speak to your landlord about this, but I mean, the government's announced some stuff on this as well, haven't it, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to look at this from two angles. You've got the private sector, whereby many of your members will be living in rented accommodation, and as I said earlier in the webinar, no landlord can start any eviction proceedings if you haven't paid your rent, certainly for 3 months. When we come onto commercial lettings, I mean, we deal with a number of property companies, to be honest, and they've all been fairly amenable for their tenants to defer. And the government has said that they should offer a 3-month moratorium. So in other words, for the next 3 months, from April through to June, potentially they don't collect their rents. And again, I think, Dan, the key is here to negotiate. Speak to your landlord. If you're with one of the big pension companies and stuff like that, I don't know what approach you will or response you'll get. But certainly if you're with a private landlord, I think most will be fairly sympathetic to you. And what I've been saying to landlords is negotiate with your tenants so that, yes, you've got to give them a moratorium for 3 months, but then agree with them now how you're going to get that back rent. So spread it over the next 12 months, 24 months or something like that. So come to an agreement which is acceptable for both you and your tenant, because the last thing you want is a vacant unit.
It's again about being proactive, isn't it? Going and having that conversation, isn't it, Andrew? And just saying, look, what can you do to help me out here? Because at the end of the day, they're in a lot of these landlords are going to be in a right pickle if lots of hospitality and retail businesses go down, aren't they?
From those buildings down, and they need that rental income to come in, as so don't think they're all millionaires or whatever. They probably need that rental income, so they will be keen to be receptive to your bidding.
If you've got mortgage, again, go and speak to your mortgage provider, credit cards, overdrafts, go and speak to them, have a chat with them. Yeah.
On the mortgages, you've got a 3-month holiday period on a mortgage, but you must again contact your lender. Don't just do it and stop your payments, because that one thing that really upsets people, annoys people, is if there's a commitment there that's not met. So get in touch with them.
Yeah. Finally, then we're going to think about the loan scheme. We've already touched on the business interruption loan scheme. Are catering businesses eligible for the business interruption loan scheme, Andrew?
Of course they are. Any business is eligible for the business interruption loan scheme. Now, but the banks are looking at the usual financial information they would for any loan. But remember, the loan is 80% backed by the government. So you should find that the banks are more receptive to you than they would be under normal circumstances. 80% backed by the government, interest-free for a year. And as I said, Barclays, from my notes over here, have offered a 12-month capital repayment holiday. If you can get hold of something like that, could mean the difference between liquidation and survival.
So how do I go about getting one? Do I have to go to my bank, the bank that I bank with, or can go to any?
You can go to any bank. You can go to any bank. I did notice on the chat box that somebody was having trouble with Santander, actually, I think with any bank, it just depends who you know at the branch and stuff like that. Because we've had quite a success with Santander, to be honest, and some of the others, like Lloyd's, have been quite difficult to deal with. So what happens, certainly with Lloyd's, is that you make an application, fill in a form that you can get off their website. Then they say to you, yes, I think you might be eligible for this, or yes, we might be able to advise you and help you. And then they ask for all the supporting information, which is probably where your accountants come in. So they need cash flow. They need details of your personal assets and liabilities. They need a reason why you want the loan. They need details of your finance that you've got elsewhere, like credit cards and stuff like that. That's when the work kicks in to get them a package together. And our advice would be, get it ready first time, because one thing that delays loans is missing information. So if you can get your package together, fully answering all their points first time, it'll go through quicker.
Yeah, there is a website which covers all the different. Sorry, Roxy.
So no, I was just going to say that, we talk about compliancy with our members all the time, making sure that you have all of your documentation together. Your finances are as important, if not more, at this stage. And everybody knows how to organise their documents, and it's just a timely process sometimes. But give yourself a reward, a glass of wine afterwards, and you'll be pleased that you've done it, instead of having to redo it over and over and over again. It's super important. It's not the best or the most fun job to be doing, but it is really important.
There is a website, the British Business Bank, which outlines all the different banks which are authorised to be able to use to pay out the business interruption loan scheme. So don't just feel you need to go to your bank if they're being particularly unhelpful. There's a lot of different operators out there. If you go onto that website, and I'll put the link in the comments now, you'll find there's a lot of regional organizations, not just the big banks that you might think of. There's regional lenders who are specifically there to help you to get loans in your area. So we're in Birmingham, we're in the West Midlands. There's one specific for businesses in the West Midlands. So those are great places to go to. You'll probably find they'll be more helpful than potentially the big banks who are just at the moment just swamped with applications right now. But at the same time, it's probably worthwhile not just thinking about just the business interruption loan scheme. There is other types of finances as well, aren't there? And so if you'd like us to do a session on that, on all the different types of finance that you could potentially look to get, then we can look to do that. Let us know if that's something you'd like to do. But I'm just aware of time. We're over time now, guys. Just want to say thanks very much, Andrew. Thanks, Roxy. Thanks for and
just hope everybody found it useful. That's the main thing. Get value out.
Yeah. If you found it useful, please let us know in the comments. Please say whether you found it useful, what else you'd like us to cover. But thank you for all your questions. Please keep them coming, because we'd love to be able to help them, answer them. We're here to help you, and we want to help you to get through this. It's absolutely critical that you guys get through this, and I just want to emphasize that one point that Andrew made is about being proactive. It's really, really, really important, even if you're no good at finance, just to actually be proactive. Andrew, what would you say to somebody who's terrible at finances? They're really, really not good. What advice would you give them finally to say to them?
Well, really, Dan, there's no excuse for that nowadays, because we've got all the software that's been developed in the last few years, sort of like cloud accounting and stuff like that. Get yourself a good accountant would be the first thing, obviously, because they've been through this. They know the ways in which you can access finance. Yes, they charge money, but usually you'll find it's money well spent. So that would be my first thing. And always plan for the future. That's the first thing. Don't go into it blind. Try and do yourself a little forecast to see how much money you're going to need to get through this situation, so that you know how much capital you're going to have to need. Do those two things, and you've got a chance of success.
That's featured in some of our resources online as well. We've done there's a little budget sheet. If you look on our Corona.
There you go. Fantastic. Get in there.
Yeah, that resource is there for our members. Dan, I'll let you sign off. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks Andrew. Thanks Roxy. Thanks everybody.
Thank you guys.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.